What if one of the oldest human habits was quietly rewiring your brain? Scientists have started scanning the brains of people who pray. And what they're finding isn't mystical, it isn't supernatural, but it is surprising. This is what happens inside your brain when you pray, every day, for 30 days. Billions of people around the world pray, every day, before meals, before sleep, in moments of fear, in moments of gratitude. But very few of those people have ever stopped to ask, what is actually happening in my brain when I do this? In the last 2 decades, neuroscientists have begun studying prayer with the same tools they use to study memory, emotion, and attention. And what they've found challenges the assumption that science and faith have nothing to say to each other. This isn't a video about whether prayer works. It's about what prayer does to your neurons, your nervous system, and your mind over time. When a person begins to pray, really pray, not recite words mechanically, something measurable happens in the brain. Neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Newberg at Thomas Jefferson University has spent decades imaging the brains of people during deep prayer and meditation. What he consistently finds is a shift in activity across 2 key networks. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for focused attention and deliberate thought, lights up. At the same time, activity in the parietal lobe, which processes your sense of self and where your body ends and the world begins, tends to quiet down. In simple terms, the brain becomes more focused and less self-absorbed. Attention narrows. The mental noise of the day fades. This isn't unique to prayer. It happens during deep meditation too. But prayer adds something meditation doesn't always include: language, relationship, and intention directed towards something beyond the self. And here is where something ancient lines up with something modern. Philippians 4:6-7 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds." Paul wrote that 2,000 years ago. Neuroscience is only now catching up to what he described, a practice that, when done consistently, produces something that feels like peace and appears in brain scans to look like it too. Stress is one of the most studied threats to human health, and one of the clearest findings in prayer research is its effect on the body's stress response. When you're under stress, your hypothalamus triggers the release of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Over time, chronic cortisol elevation damages memory, disrupts sleep, weakens the immune system, and increases the risk of depression and anxiety. Prayer, particularly the kind that involves surrender, trust, or gratitude, appears to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. This is sometimes called the rest and digest response, the opposite of fight or flight. Heart rate slows, breathing deepens, cortisol levels drop. The body enters a state that resembles the relaxation response identified by Harvard cardiologist Dr. Herbert Benson, a measurable physiological shift triggered by focused, repetitive mental practice. Researchers at Duke University, including Dr. Harold Koenig, have found consistent links between regular religious practice, including prayer, and lower rates of depression, anxiety, and stress-related illness. None of this requires belief to be biologically real. The mechanism works whether you understand it or not. But for those who do believe, there is something profound in the image this creates. Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Rest in the ancient world wasn't laziness. It was restoration. And modern neuroscience is discovering that certain forms of directed attention, like prayer, may genuinely restore something in the brain that stress depletes. Here is one of the most important ideas in modern brain science. Your brain is not fixed. For most of human history, scientists believed that the adult brain was essentially a finished product, set in its ways, unchangeable. We now know that is wrong. The brain is neuroplastic. It rewires itself in response to what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. Every repeated behavior carves a deeper groove in your neural architecture. Habits literally reshape the brain's physical structure. When you pray every day for 30 days, you are not just completing a religious exercise. You are engaging in a repeated, focused mental practice that, according to the principles of neuroplasticity, begins to change how your brain is organized. The pathways associated with focused attention grow stronger. The circuits connected to rumination, anxiety, and self-criticism may begin to thin. New emotional defaults start to form. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen passively. But 30 days of consistent, intentional practice is often cited in habit research as the threshold where new neural patterns begin to stabilize. And then there is this, written long before neuroscience had the language to explain it. Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The Greek word used there, metamorpho, is the same root as metamorphosis. A structural transformation, not a surface change, not just thinking differently, an actual reshaping of the inner architecture. That is precisely what neuroplasticity describes. One of the most consistent elements of prayer, across traditions, cultures, and centuries, is gratitude. People give thanks. They name what they have. They acknowledge what they've received. And this act, however simple it sounds, has a significant effect on the brain. Dr. Robert Emmons at UC Davis has spent years studying the science of gratitude. His research shows that people who regularly practice gratitude, even through something as simple as writing down what they're thankful for, report higher levels of positive emotion, better sleep, greater resilience, and reduced envy and resentment. Brain imaging supports this. Gratitude activates the medial prefrontal cortex, a region involved in learning, moral reasoning, and social bonding. Over time, people who practice gratitude regularly appear to develop a stronger baseline activation in areas linked to positive emotion. Prayer, when it includes thanksgiving, functions as a daily gratitude practice. It shifts attention away from what is lacking, away from anxiety about the future, and toward what is already present. It changes the lens through which you see your own life. 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. 3 instructions, 3 practices, all of them from a neuroscience standpoint, associated with measurable shifts in emotional well-being. That alignment is hard to ignore. 30 days is not an arbitrary number. Psychologist Philippa Lally at University College London found that habit formation takes anywhere from 18 to 254 days, with an average around 66 days. But the research also shows that early consistency, the first 30 days, is when the most significant shifts in automaticity occur. When something stops being an effort and starts being a pattern. For someone who commits to prayer for 30 consecutive days, several things tend to happen simultaneously. The practice becomes easier. The resistance lowers. The brain begins to associate the cue, a time of day, a posture, a place, with the behavior. What felt like discipline starts to feel like rhythm. And alongside that shift in habit, research suggests the cumulative psychological effects begin to compound. Lower average stress, higher baseline positivity, improved ability to regulate emotions under pressure, greater sense of meaning and coherence in daily life. These aren't just spiritual claims. They appear consistently in peer-reviewed literature on religious practice, mindfulness, and habit formation. The mechanism, repeated, focused, intentional mental engagement, is the common thread. Science studies the brain. It measures what it can measure: electrical activity, cortisol levels, neural pathway density, activation patterns. What it cannot measure is meaning. It cannot scan for transformation of character. It cannot image the experience of feeling heard, or known, or no longer alone. But here is what it can say. The act of praying, when done consistently, attentively, and with genuine intention, engages your brain in ways that reduce stress, strengthen focus, build emotional resilience, and gradually change how you think. Whether you call that biology or grace may depend on what you already believe. But the two don't have to contradict each other. Science and faith are asking different questions about the same human being. And perhaps the most interesting question isn't whether prayer rewires the brain. It's this: if 30 days of consistent, intentional prayer can change something measurable in your neurology, what might it change in the rest of your life? Think about that.